Omaha World Herald, and the New York Times. Our your readers for this evening are Jim Carlson and Steve Sleeper. Those like gentlemen are ready and ready to go to start your live reading for you. So I'm going to get it all over that and then get started on your live reading for you.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening, everyone. This is Jim Carlson. I will be reading from the Omaha World Herald this evening. Mr. Steve Sleeper is alongside me. Steve, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, Jim. I'm good. I can't complain. How about you?
Oh, I would never complain either. Yeah.
I complain a lot to my wife, but she's not listening.
There's a reason for that.
Yes, there is.
Well, we're going to start with a story from the World Herald. It's out of Washington, and it's that time of the year where the U.S. Supreme Court is involved. The U.S. Supreme Court has managed to steer away from controversy in the 3 months since Justice Scalia's death. That's about to get harder. The court is opening the last phase of its 9-month term, a 6-week stretch that will feature rulings on affirmative action, immigration, abortion, contraceptive coverage, and Puerto Rico's debt. A batch of opinions is likely to come today on Monday. Each dispute has the potential to divide the 8 justices, highlighting what's at stake from the Senate's refusal to consider Merrick Garland, President Barack Obama's nominee, to replace Scalia. The cases also could thrust the court more deeply into the 2016 election fray in the presidential race between Donald Trump and most likely Hillary Clinton. At the same time, the cases offer ways for the justices to rule narrowly and defer consideration of more sweeping issues. Those potential paths of consensus may hold appeal to a court that prides itself on being above politics, even at a time of political turmoil. I see the justices as trying to hide, said Michael Dorff, a constitutional law professor at Cornell Law School. There's a vacancy. There's this extraordinary inaction by the Senate. There's a presidential campaign that is highly unusual, the outcome of which will undoubtedly affect the membership of the court. And there are cases on the court's docket that connect to hot-button issues that divide the country pretty sharply. The justices have muddled along since Scalia's death on February 13th. Several publicly indicated that they would try to avoid a rash of 4-to-4 ties that might suggest a judiciary in crisis. Those efforts have helped produce 13 mostly narrow rulings. The biggest, a unanimous decision that said states and cities could keep using their long-standing methods for drawing election district lines, was noteworthy because mostly because it didn't produce the redistricting transformation that conservatives had sought. So far, the court has produced only 2 deadlock results, including one that let 20-plus states continue to require public sector workers to help fund the unions that represent them. That number may now start to climb. The courts risk deadlock in a fight involving religious groups that say the Obama administration is forcing them to facilitate what they consider immoral contraceptive coverage, and a clash over congressional power to authorize consumer lawsuits. The justices also might split over the president's plan to defer deportation for millions of unauthorized immigrants. For some, the biggest mystery is why the court hasn't already issued a stack of deadlock rulings, given the unlikelihood that a tie-breaking 9th justice will be seated before November. The answer may be that the court is still trying to cobble together majorities, one way or another, in perhaps the clearest sign of such efforts. After the contraceptive argument in April, the justices took the unusual step of floating a possible compromise and asking the 2 sides to comment. Some cases are proving harder to resolve than others. The consumer lawsuit dispute is pending more than 6 months later, after the November 2nd argument. The case, which concerns an allegedly error-riddled internet profile, tests the power of Congress to authorize suits by consumers who haven't suffered any clear harm. Cases could be polarizing no matter what the court decides. The immigration case plunges the court into one of the biggest issues in the presidential campaign: what to do about the 11 million people who are in the country illegally. Obama is seeking to offer a shield from deportation for about 4 million people. A 4-4 tie would leave intact a federal appeals court decision blocking Obama's executive actions, a less than ideal outcome. One possibility is that the court could rule that Texas and other states lack the legal right to challenge the president's actions on immigration. Either way, the practical impact is likely to be limited given the proximity of the presidential election. Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, has vowed to deport all unauthorized immigrants, so his election would effectively nullify any ruling favoring Obama. And a Clinton victory would ensure that either Garland or another Democratic appointee fills Scalia's seat and potentially break a 4-4 deadlock. The abortion case, testing a Texas law that puts new requirements on clinics and doctors, will produce the court's first ruling on that divisive issue since 2007. Arguments in March suggested that 5 justices were leaning toward striking down at least part of the Texas measure. A 4-4 split would let stand an appeals court ruling upholding the restriction. The affirmative action and Puerto Rico cases can't end in deadlock because only 7 justices are participating. Justice Samuel Alito has a financial conflict in the Puerto Rico case, while Justice Kagan took part in the affirmative action litigation while she was a lawyer for the Obama administration. The Puerto Rico dispute will decide the fate of a local law that would let the island's public utilities restructure billions of dollars of debt. The court is considering the case while Congress attempts to work out a broader plan to address the Commonwealth's $70 billion debt. A ruling backing the law would give new leverage to Puerto Rico's advocates in Congress. The affirmative action case centers on an unusual University of Texas admissions policy that considers race only for a subset of the entering class. Justice Anthony Kennedy, who's seen as the potential swing vote, indicated during arguments in December that he was conflicted. So there you go. That's the latest news on the United States Supreme Court.
Well, and the New York Times in their online edition does have an update on one case. The Supreme Court decided not to do anything. It said it would not rule in a major case on access to contraception and instruct lower courts to explore whether a compromise was possible. The case Zubrick versus Burrell was brought by religious groups that object to providing insurance coverage for contraception to their female employees. The Supreme Court urged the lower courts to allow the parties sufficient time to resolve any outstanding issues between them, and they emphasized that they had decided nothing. This getting back to what you were talking about, Jim, about they just didn't want a 4-4 deadlock. It
Right.
sounds like.
Yeah.
So they just sidestepped it. Justice Sonia Sotomayor filed a concurrence, which was joined by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, underscoring the limited nature of the court's action and cautioning lower courts not to read into it. The case was the court's second encounter with the contraception requirement, and the 4th time it considered an aspect of the Affordable Care Act. So many religious groups around the nation challenged the accommodation, saying that objecting and providing the required information would make them complicit in conduct that violated their faith. Jim?
All right.
Got anything?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's see here. We've got some news out of Japan. A chain of earthquakes like the one that hit Kumamoto, Japan, and neighboring areas could occur in other regions, given the numerous active faults in the nation. The Kumamoto earthquake illustrated the fact that Japan is one of the most earthquake-prone countries. About 10% of the world's earthquakes occur in the nation. The Kumamoto earthquake occurred in an active fault zone that was causing quakes following repetitive movements that created fissures in the ground. Active faults move once every 1,000 years to tens of thousands of years, but it cannot be predicted exactly when. There are 2,000 active faults across the nation and 97 active fault zones that have been designated as key areas that could move within 30 years. The Hinagu fault zone caused a magnitude 6.5 quake on the night of April 14th. And the Futagawa fault zone caused a magnitude 7.3 quake in the early morning of April 16th. Both are designated as key fault zones. The first quake was followed about 28 hours later by the second one. The quake on the night of April 14th triggered the main quake in the Futagawa fault zone, said Professor Kazuki Koteki of the University of Tokyo's Earthquake Research Institute. We have to be aware that if active faults are connected with others, a series of major earthquakes could occur in areas other than Kumamoto. Earthquakes frequently occur in Japan because the country is located on 4 plates out of a dozen or so that cover the surface of the earth that overlap each other. Also, a sea plate is submerging beneath the land plate, causing tension to build up. This is a major factor that causes active faults to move. A new fault zone was found when the Iwate Mayagawa inland earthquake hit the Tohoku region in 2008. It had a magnitude of 7.2 and registered upper 6 on the Japanese seismic intensity scale of 7. An earthquake may occur in the future in a fault zone that has not been found. An earthquake with a focus just below an inland area like the Kumamoto quake is likely to cause damage in limited areas compared with those that hit areas bordering seabed plates. Therefore, it's important for local governments to take disaster countermeasures. Nobuo Fukawa, director of Nagoya University's Disaster Mitigation Research Center, said, areas that have not been hit by quakes recently should change their mindset and assume that the time for a quake is approaching. They should prepare disaster countermeasures led by local governments.
A man whose penis was removed because of cancer has received the first penis transplant in the U.S. at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. He's a bank courier from Halifax. He underwent the 15-hour transplant operation on May 8th and 9th. The organ came from a deceased donor. He said he was hardly feeling any pain, and he was sitting up in a chair. The plastic and reconstructive surgeons said they're cautiously optimistic, but that it's uncharted water for them. The surgery is experimental, part of a research program with the ultimate goal of helping combat veterans with severe pelvic injuries, as well as cancer patients and accident victims. And if all goes as planned, normal urination would be possible, and for the fellow that had the transplant, and sexual function in weeks to months. He also, the guy that got it, said he really didn't want to look at it for a while. He will have to take several anti-rejection drugs for the rest of his life. One of them will speed nerve regeneration and help restore function to the transplant. Another patient whose penis was destroyed by burns in a car accident will receive a transplant as soon as a donor becomes available. Surgeons at Johns Hopkins said they are planning to perform a transplant on a combat veteran injured in Afghanistan. He's been on the waiting list for several months. The estimated cost is $50,000 to $75,000. Both hospitals are paying for the procedures, and the doctors are donating their time. Veterans are a major focus of transplant programs in the U.S. because of suicide rates. They're pretty high in soldiers that had that kind of damage. So some interesting news coming out of Massachusetts.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay. An article from the Washington Post that is published in the World Herald today. The first salvo was a missile launch by the Chinese in 2007 that blew up a dead satellite. But it was another Chinese launch 3 years ago that made the Pentagon really snap to attention, opening up the possibility that outer space would become a new front in modern warfare. This time, the rocket reached close to a far more distant orbit, one that's 22,000 miles away, and just happens to be where the United States parks its most sensitive national security satellites, used for tasks such as guiding precision bombs and spying on adversaries. The flyby served as a wake-up call and prompted the Defense Department and intelligence agencies to begin spending billions of dollars to protect what Air Force General John Hyten, in an interview, called the most valuable real estate in space. Faced with the prospect of hostilities there, defense officials are developing ways to protect exposed satellites floating in orbit and to keep apprised of what an enemy is doing hundreds, if not thousands of miles above Earth's surface. They are making satellites more resilient, enabling them to withstand jamming efforts. And instead of relying only on large and expensive systems, defense officials plan to send swarms of small satellites into orbit that are much more difficult to target. National security officials are not only concerned that missiles could take out their satellites, but also that a craft's equipment could be easily jammed. Potential enemies could dazzle sensors, temporarily blinding them. That could lead to soldiers stranded on the battlefield with little means of communication, or missiles that would not be able to find their targets. A lot of our systems are big, expensive, enormously capable, but enormously vulnerable, said Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Work. While the United States has been bogged down in counterterrorism operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, Pentagon officials say Russia and China have been developing the capability to attack the United States in space. Navy Admiral Cecil Haney, commander of the U.S. Strategic Command based at Offutt Air Force Base south of Bellevue, said that North Korea has successfully jammed GPS satellites, that Iran was busy developing a space program, and that violent extremist organizations were able to access space-based technologies to help them encrypt communications, among other things. We must recognize that despite our efforts, a future conflict may start or extend into space.
Dateline San Juan, Puerto Rico, Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders warned Monday of a humanitarian crisis in Puerto Rico, calling on the U.S. government to support a debt restructure in the territory. Addressing a crowd in San Juan ahead of Puerto Rico's June 5th primary, Sanders called upon the U.S. Federal Reserve to authorize emergency loans and use its authority to allow for a restructuring. The Vermont senator also said hedge funds that hold a significant portion of the island's $70 billion public debt should take a massive haircut as the island continues to default on multi-million-dollar bond payments. They can't have it all. It's morally unacceptable that billionaire hedge fund managers have been calling for even more austerity in Puerto Rico. The people of Puerto Rico should not be forced to suffer even more, said Sanders. The island is mired in a decade-long economic crisis and smothered by a public debt load that the governor of Puerto Rico has said is unpayable and needs restructuring. Sanders said he would alleviate Puerto Rico's economic woes in part by rebuilding local infrastructure to create jobs and establish a clean economy by harnessing the island's solar and wind resources. He also called for an independent audit of Puerto Rico's debt and said that if any of the debt violated the island's constitution, it should be immediately set aside. Sanders said he would also create a clear, binding referendum to give Puerto Ricans the chance to determine the island's future. He rejected a proposal by the U.S. Congress to create a fiscal oversight board to help Puerto Rico manage its debt, calling it undemocratic. Sanders' visit comes a day before former President Bill Clinton arrives to campaign for his wife. Let's see, Congress has stalled on approving a plan to help Puerto Rico manage a debt incurred over decades as government spending went unchecked. House Speaker Paul Ryan says he expects to introduce a revised bill in coming days. With all the campaigning there, Puerto Rican Democrats will choose 67 delegates to the party's national convention. So that Clinton and Sanders are both down there campaigning, albeit Bill's a surrogate for his wife.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Some news around the nation. A swimmer walked out of the water in Boca Raton, Florida on Sunday with a small nurse shark biting her right forearm. And no matter what she did, the 2-foot nurse shark refused to release its bite, even after it died. There was very little blood, officials said. Paramedics took the woman, age 23, with the dead shark still attached to her arm, to a hospital where she was treated and released. The shark wouldn't give up, said Shlomo Jacob of Boca Raton, among the beachgoers who looked on. Might be a little unusual, I would think. Out of Augusta, Augusta, Kansas, authorities said 2 people were wounded Sunday at a high school graduation in southern Kansas when a man with a concealed weapon permit adjusted a sock he had stuffed a pistol into and the weapon discharged. Augusta Police Chief Tyler Brewer said the shooting was accidental and described it as a knucklehead situation. The bullet went through the man's foot and then traveled about 50 feet before striking a woman in her calf. Their injuries were not life-threatening. Brewer said the Augusta High School commencement continued after the shooting, with most people unaware of what had happened. Brewer said he plans to present the case to prosecutors because it's illegal to carry firearms onto school grounds. Out of Pinedale, Wyoming, a woman and her 4 teenage daughters who were lured to a Utah house and tied up in the basement were relieved to learn that the father and son charged in the entrapment were in custody in Wyoming. Neither man was cooperating as investigators tried to learn more. A manhunt culminated with the arrest of Derek James Harrison, age 22, several hours after the surrender of his father, Flint Wayne Harrison, age 51. The men faced various charges stemming from the Tuesday attack in Centerville, Utah, including aggravated kidnapping. The men had been using heavily and falsely believed the woman had reported them. Out of Tampa, Florida, when a venomous eastern diamondback rattlesnake appeared in the backyard of a 7-year-old Florida girl, her German Shepherd came to her rescue, refusing to back down despite multiple snake bites. Next, donors came to the rescue, quickly topping the goal of $15,000 on a GoFundMe account to help pay for the anti-venom needed to keep the dog alive. Molly DeLuca was playing with her 2-year-old shepherd named Haas when the snake showed up last week. Haas jumped between them and was bitten 3 times, suffering damage to his kidneys. Veterinarians are now expecting a full recovery. Danya DeLuca says her daughter and the rescue dog they adopted 2 months ago are inseparable. So she's not surprised he would risk his life to save her. And out of Laredo, Texas, the Texas bus company involved in a rollover crash that killed 8 people and injured 44 others had twice been ordered by Louisiana state inspectors in 2015 to take one of the buses off the road to fix brake and emergency exit problems. Records posted online show that federal regulators ordered OGA Charters of San Juan, Texas, to sideline the bus last May because of brake problems, and again last August when the brakes were getting worse. Federal investigators arrived Sunday to try to determine the cause of Saturday's crash, which occurred 46 miles north of Laredo.
Okay, from the New York Times, Dateline Seattle, ever since last summer, when Lynn Gemmel's dog Bella was inducted into the trial of a drug that has been shown to significantly lengthen the lives of laboratory mice, she's been the object of intense scrutiny among dog park regulars. To those who insist that Bella 8 has turned back into a puppy, look how fast she's getting that ball. Ms. Gemmel has tried to turn a deaf ear. Bella, a border collie Australian shepherd mix, may have been given a placebo for one thing. The drug rapamycin has improved the heart health and appeared to delay the onset of some diseases in older mice, but it may not work the same magic for dogs. There's also a chance it could do more harm than good. This is to look at, amongst other things, the side effects in dogs, Mrs. Gemmel told Bella's many well-wishers. Technically, that's true, but the trial also represents a new frontier in testing a proposition for improving human health. Rather than only seeking treatments for the individual maladies that come with age, we might do better to target the biology that underlies aging itself. While the diseases that now kill most people in developed nations, heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer, have different immediate causes, age is the major risk factor for all of them. That means that even treatment breakthroughs in those areas, no matter how vital to individuals, would yield on average 4 or 5 more years of life, and some of them likely shadowed by illness. A drug that slows aging, the logic goes, might instead serve to delay the onset of several major diseases at once. A handful of drugs tested by federally funded laboratories in recent years appear to extend the healthy lives of mice. It was approved by the Food and Drug Administration for organ transplant patients and to treat some types of cancer. In a 2014 study by the drug company Novartis, the drug appeared to bolster the immune system in older patients, and the early results in aging dogs suggest that, and again, the name of the drug is rapamycin, is helping them too. So some interesting news coming on the drug front there, Jim.
I guess. Okay. From the Omaha World Herald. Omaha and Papillion firefighters no longer automatically respond to calls in each other's jurisdiction, even if they're closer. Then Omaha Fire Chief Bernie Kanger notified the Papillion chief last month that Omaha was terminating its automatic aid agreement with Papillion, whose fire department also covers La Vista. Omaha Interim Chief Dan Olson said Friday that the agreement wasn't improving response time in Omaha as it was intended to. And, he said, calls in Papillion were drawing Omaha firefighters away from their duties in Omaha. The automatic aid agreement stipulated that when residents of some areas called 911, they would get a response from the nearest emergency crew, regardless of which city they lived in. Olson noted that the cities still share a mutual aid agreement where firefighters can ask for help from their counterparts in another city. We still have great relationships, Olson said. The Omaha, Papillion, and Bellevue departments announced in 2012 that they had signed an automatic aid agreement for fire and medical calls. That agreement was revamped in 2014. Bellevue still has an automatic aid agreement with each of the other cities. The agreement between Omaha and Papillion was terminated April 15th. Mayor Gene Stothard said the Omaha Fire Department was answering more calls in Papillion and La Vista than the Papillion responders were in Omaha. Stothard said the city's agreement with Bellevue did not produce much work for Omaha. The change means Omaha's Station 65 won't automatically respond to the west end of La Vista near PayPal and Cabela's. And the Papillion Fire Department won't automatically respond to a zone of south central Omaha near Ralston. Papillion Fire Chief Bill Bowes said he doesn't fault Omaha for terminating the agreement because the goal was to provide the best service. He also said he appreciates Omaha giving it a try for 2 years. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but hopefully that door will be open in the future if we need it, Bowes said. That part of La Vista is growing, but it doesn't receive a lot of calls, and most of them are medical. Newer buildings in that part of La Vista include the Alamo Draft House Cinema and several hotels. Most of the newer buildings are protected by sprinkler systems. Papillion's paid fire department has covered the city of La Vista since 2014. Prior to that, La Vista had a volunteer fire department. It just means Engine 2 and Engine 4 will be a little busier, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, Chief Bowles said.
Back to the New York Times, Dateline Seattle. In early April, Kellen Wadich, the general manager at Amazon's warehouse in Middletown, Delaware, told hundreds of workers at the Cavernous facility a troubling story about his family being abandoned by his father's union. Flashing a photograph of himself as a boy with his father, Wadich said the union did not help his family financially after his father died suddenly in front of their house. not even bothering to send a condolence card, according to 3 current workers at the warehouse who heard him speak and asked for anonymity for fear of losing their jobs. The problem is his story appears to be untrue. For years, Amazon has successfully battled to keep unions out of the company. After the incident involving Waddish, was an illustration of how important it is to Amazon, or at least to some of its employees, to keep it that way. Just days after a reporter approached Amazon about the inconsistencies in Waddish's story, Scott Stanzel, an Amazon spokesman, said Waddish was no longer with the company. Respond to repeated messages sent to his email address and Facebook account. Message left at a listed number for his mother was not returned. In the United States, Amazon employs more than 90,000 people in what the company calls fulfillment centers, giant warehouses where customer orders are prepared and shipped. Some Amazon fulfillment center workers see unions as a way to gain more influence on pay, how job assignments are doled out, and the handling of workplace complaints. Amazon worries unions will burden its operations with red tape, hurting the nimbleness of its facilities. It is constantly adjusting to be more efficient with robots and other innovations. Amazon's culture and business model are based on rapid innovation, flexibility, and open lines of direct communication between managers and associates, said a spokesman. This direct connection is the most effective way to understand and respond to the wants and needs of our associates. Union officials think Amazon fights so hard to keep them at bay to prevent a domino effect amongst its warehouses. This is Amazon's biggest fear, said Andy Powell, a district organizer for the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, who is trying to organize Amazon fulfillment center workers in Delaware and several nearby states. The minute one falls and people see they get a better deal, it's going to be a cancer for them. Unions have not made much progress at Amazon after years of campaigns, which union officials and warehouse workers blame partly on the high turnover rate in its fulfillment centers. A labor union in Germany has organized frequent strikes over pay and workplace conditions by a portion of workers at Amazon fulfillment centers in the country, though the workers do not have a union contract with Amazon. In 2014, the Machinist Union helped organize a union vote by a small number of technicians and mechanics who work on order fulfillment equipment at the fulfillment center in Middleton, a community of 19,000, about a half hour from Wilmington. It was the first vote of its kind at an Amazon warehouse, but workers voted 21-6 to reject the plan, which was opposed by Amazon. The company said there are about 3,000 full-time workers at the facility. Since late fall, representatives of the Machinist Union, including Mr. Powell, have passed out leaflets at a busy intersection outside the fulfillment center. Some employees at the facility have encouraged co-workers to consider the potential benefits of joining a union.
Very good. All right. Out of Fort Calhoun, Nebraska, the sweeping panorama of America's western expansion is found along a 13-mile corridor from Fort Atkinson south to Fort Omaha. The two fort sites span the period of the Lewis and Clark expedition of 1804 to 1806. To the Indian Wars later that century, the territory also includes a historic site that draws tens of thousands of national and international visitors yearly, the Winter Quarters Encampment by immigrating Mormons. In the short-lived and long-lost Army outpost along the Missouri River known as Engineer Cantonment that dates to America's 5th president. Despite its rich history and scenic location overlooking the Missouri River Valley north of Omaha, Fort Atkinson State Historical Park is at a crossroads. Low visitation and deteriorating log walls have taken a toll. But this community of 900 people in the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission are poised to deploy more manpower, money, and marketing into the park. It starts now with a tactical plan geared toward making Fort Atkinson a viable tourist destination, bringing the fort's displays and historical interpretation into the 21st century, and increasing visitation to the site and the community within 5 years. Bob Horner of Lincoln, the Game and Parks Assistant Division Administrator who oversees the historical parks, said the fort has some of the greatest potential in the state to be a bigger and better attraction. Horner and colleague Craig Wacker, recreation planner, presented the plan and its 7 goals to an overflow crowd of 65 people in the library at the Fort Calhoun High School last week. Dave Genoways of Fort Calhoun, business manager of the local school district, said only about 12 days a year feature special events at the State Historical Park. He asked how the site could be made more relevant to visitors if there is no living history demonstration or other big events scheduled. Wacker said figuring out how to tell a park story when the living history storytellers are not on duty is one of the most difficult challenges for historical parks. Fort Atkinson was young America's largest military post and the nation's first fort west of the Missouri River. It existed from 1819 to 1827 and operated the first school, farm, sawmill, hospital, and library in what decades later would be Nebraska. Years earlier, the Lewis and Clark expedition's historic first meeting with American Indians was held on its bluff. As recently as a few years ago, Fort Atkinson was losing more than $150,000 a year. It had nearly $500,000 in deferred maintenance needs. Its annual visitation has stabilized to about 29,000, despite its location near Omaha, the state's largest city. Pam Daly of Fort Calhoun, noting Nebraska's agricultural heritage started at the fort, said farm-to-table activities should be included. Penny Ackenbauer of Council Bluffs encouraged the commission to raise entrance fees to generate revenue to maintain the park. She said the $2 per bus fee charged for school groups and $3 charged for tour buses do not cover the cost of toilet paper the visitors use. Jim Swenson, the Commission's Park Division's administrator, said Fort Atkinson advocates need only to look at Ponca in northeast Nebraska as an example of what can be achieved by a core of committed volunteers and community organizations working with Game and Parks. Ponca State Park hosts upward of 50,000 people over a September weekend each year for an outdoor expo. It's truly a partnership, Swenson said. John Slater, a superintendent of Fort Atkinson, said the commission needs local organizations and volunteers to work with Game and Parks in achieving the goals. Game and Parks Commissioner Mick Jensen of Blair said support of the plan by the Washington County Historical Association, Friends of Fort Atkinson Foundation, the city and local businesses is impressive and necessary.
Well, here's an interesting story, Jim, out of the New York Times. Chinese authorities are quietly scrutinizing technology products sold in China by Apple and other big foreign companies, focusing on whether they pose potential security threats to the country and its consumers, and opening up a new front on an already tense relationship with Washington over digital security. Apple and other companies in recent months have been subjected to reviews that target encryption and the data storage of tech products, said people briefed on the reviews who spoke on a condition of anonymity. In the reviews, Chinese officials require executives or employees of the foreign tech companies to answer questions about the products in person, according to these people. The reviews are run by a committee associated with the Cyberspace Administration of China, the country's Internet Control Bureau. The Bureau includes experts and engineers with ties to the country's military and security agencies. While other countries, including the US and Britain, conduct reviews of some tech products, they usually focus on products that will be used by the military or other parts of the government that are concerned with security, not on products sold to the general public. Chinese reviews stand out because they are being applied more broadly, including to American consumer software and gadgets popular in China, the people briefed on the review said, and because Chinese officials have not disclosed the nature of the checks. Both the United States government and the American tech companies fear that the reviews could be used to extract tech knowledge, as well as to ensure the U.S. was not using the products to spy. Ultimately, the reviews could be used to block products without explanation or to extract trade secrets in exchange for market access. Those secrets could be leaked to Chinese competitors or expose vulnerabilities, which in turn Chinese hackers could exploit. Further, tech companies are concerned that the reviews could set a precedent and that other countries will follow suit, each demanding different checks that would not only be costly, but also put the companies at risk of having to hand over further secrets in exchange for market access. China and the United States have been embroiled in a quarrel about tech and security that has strained their relationship. The reviews could be a fresh sticking point, raising questions about the security of American technology and the degree to which American companies will acquiesce to Beijing's demands for fear of being punished in a huge market still partly controlled by the state. Chinese companies have not formally disclosed they are conducting the reviews, and their existence had not previously been confirmed outside of rare brief mentions in local news media.
Okay. Out of Central City, Nebraska. A Nebraska soldier will be honored on Memorial Day in Central City, 71 years after his death. The grave of Benjamin Jackson, a veteran of the Indian Wars, will receive a military headstone. The grave has been unmarked since Jackson's death in 1945, when he was 89 years old. Military records show that he served in the Army from 1881 to 1886 as a Buffalo Soldier, a name given to African Americans serving in the Indian Wars. The Indians gave them the name because of their curly hair, like the curly hair on a buffalo, said Merrick County Historical Society President Bill Bolte, who has spent decades researching the Indian Wars. Bolte said Jackson's service was discovered during research for another project. He came across a 1932 article in the Central City Republican Nonpareil that detailed Jackson's designation to receive a $30 monthly military pension. Jackson was 72 years old then, but had served the country in his 20s. Central City cemetery records and newspaper accounts in Central City and Grand Island show Jackson was buried there, near his wife, Ida Fears Jackson, who died in 1933. Jackson served as a private in Company M of the 9th Cavalry Regiment. Online data shows that the 9th Cavalry started its duties in Texas in the late 1860s. It served in New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas from 1875 to 1881. The 9th Cavalry was transferred to Fort Riley, Kansas in 1881 and to Fort Robinson, Nebraska in 1885. After his military discharge, Jackson returned to Nebraska. Department of Veterans Affairs records show that he worked as a laborer in Omaha until 1890 when he moved to O'Neill. Military records show that Jackson farmed for years near Central City. The article about his pension stated that he was known to young and old alike. He is a teamster by trade, a willing worker, and a good citizen, the 1932 article stated. It was not generally known, however, that he was a participant in the Indian Wars during the 1880s. The ceremony will begin at 10 a.m. May 30th at the Central City Cemetery and is free and open to the public. So a nice story about that.
Yeah, very interesting.
Well, it's about 10 till, Steve. I think maybe I should go ahead and do those
Sounds good to me.
death notices. These are the death notices in today's Omaha World Herald. The first one is Blessy, Leon C. Blessy, age 87, of Omaha. Memorials requested to the American Cancer Society, or the VFW. The Bethany Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Cody, Michael D. Cody, age 64, of Lashera, Nebraska. The Reichmuth Funeral Home in charge of arrangements. Memorials to the family. Crisp, John E. Crisp, age 59, of Omaha. The Thomas Funeral Home in charge of arrangements. Farron, Charlie R. Farron, age 72, of Omaha. Efi Hoffman Dora Cutler, in charge of arrangements. Huber, Frank L. Huber, age 79, of Omaha. Efi Hoffman Dora Cutler, in charge of arrangements. Memorials are suggested to St. Paul United Methodist Church of Papillion, or to a charity of a donor's choice. Larkin, Adelina Larkin, age 94, of Omaha. John A. Gentleman Mortuary is in charge. Memorials are suggested to Duchesne Academy of Omaha. Lintz, Ruth Lintz, age 96, of Tecumseh, Nebraska. The Wary Mortuary in Tecumseh is in charge of arrangements. Moore, Robert D. Moore, age 82, of Plattsmouth, Nebraska. The Roby Funeral Home in Plattsmouth is in charge of arrangements. Memorials are suggested to the Plattsmouth Fire Department, Plattsmouth Rescue Squad, Church of the Holy Spirit in Plattsmouth, the Plattsmouth Alumni Association, Cass County Museum, or Plattsmouth Senior Citizens Center. Peterson, Wendell S. Peterson, age 88, of Omaha. The Westlawn Hillcrest Funeral Home in charge of arrangements. Roth, Benjamin Russell Roth, age 38, of Council Bluffs, Iowa. The Hoy Kilnoski Funeral Home in Council Bluff is in charge of arrangements. Memorials are suggested to the family. Sarka, Marta A. Sarka, age 86, of Omaha. The Corisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home in charge of arrangements. Shanahan, Lucille F. Shanahan, age 93, of Omaha. Heafy Hoffman Dwark Cutler in charge of arrangements. Shiflett, Audrey Jean Shiflett, age 73, of Papillion, Nebraska. The Kaler Dulce Mortuary in Papillion is in charge of arrangements. And Windholm, Teresa Rita Windholm, age 84, of Omaha. The Heafy Hoffman Dwark Cutler in charge of arrangements. And that concludes the notices in today's Omaha World Herald. And listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. And as always, folks, we thank you so much for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
All right. That brings us to a break. Can you get going on a few things?
Yeah, I just noticed that it said to do both the Journal Star and the World Herald. I already threw the Journal Star away, so oh well. Yeah. I'll have to remember that next time. Yeah. Oh, I know where the Journal Star, New York Times at night, they wanted some unique content. That's kind of part of the charter when they do, or you know, that's some rule or something. They got to have some unique content there. So, because otherwise it would be the same thing. You know, then why not just automate it? You know, record it, play it back. You know, so,
True.
so that was the reason
Well, I know when they announced the change
On this date in 1770,
6 weeks ago, whatever it was,
married the future king.
that was one of the questions was, is there a need for evening readers?
Yeah, yeah.
The thought for today, the work is about a search for daily.
Well, I've got a list of letters to the editor.
I've got an opinion thing here I can read and then turn it over to you for letters to the editor. If you like, I can kick her off.
Good
Give you
idea.
a break.
Yeah. You got any good letters to read?
I don't know. I didn't even look.
Oh. I know sometimes you do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. In the New York Times.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them are kind of good.
I think they're a little more interesting than the World Herald just because they're got that local, you know.
Yeah.
And there's always some goofball I know.
There you go. That's right.
Online fundraising. It's a community-wide event, May 25th, to show off Omaha's spirit of giving and raise awareness about local nonprofits. Learn more at rtbs.org or omahagives24.org. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of your break for this evening. I want you to remember that this is the Radio Talking Book
I
Network,
don't even know what they call it that.
information network, serving Nebraska and its neighboring
A
states.
40-second break.
The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you in cooperation from KIOSFM in Omaha and the statewide in the NBC Radio Network. Well, it brings us back to live reading for you. So I'm going to head on over back to the gentleman in the studio, and they're going to get right on started with their live reading for you.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Steve Sleeper here. Jim's going to be along in just a little bit. He's got some letters from the World Herald, letters to the editor. That's what I was trying to say, from the World Herald that he's going to read, and got a story from the opinion page of the New York Times. Donald Trump has promised to make America great again, and people have listened. He's the presumptive Republican nominee. He got there with that one consistent campaign imperative splashed across his website on loud red baseball caps, on stickers, yard signs, and other slogan-ready paraphernalia. This is the one true, unwavering message Trump offers his supporters. He may avoid direct answers on his taxes, but he has never backtracked on the need to return the country to its previous glory. Which America is he promising us, asked the New York Times. If you ask his supporters, they say life has gotten worse for people like them over the last 50 years. It seems safe to assume that in the eyes of Trump's overwhelmingly white male fans, America was greater a half century ago. Indeed, it was pretty great for them. It's not just that factory jobs were more plentiful or that women and minorities were largely kept from their positions of power. Large national programs that radically changed the country kept America great, specifically for white men. New Deal era systems like Social Security and unemployment insurance, rules that started minimum wages and maximum work hours and protected unionization, and the GI Bill and the end of World War II substantially transformed the country and created a booming middle class. But they all purposefully left out most women and minorities. Social Security's main program, which has become known by the name of the original bill, was old age insurance. It was meant to ensure that old age was not synonymous with poverty. The Social Security Act of 1935, which created this and other key programs, was groundbreaking. It is the most comprehensive and influential social program the country's ever enacted. But it was implemented with enormous loopholes. To gain the votes of Southern Democrats who wanted to protect the Jim Crow structures of the South, agricultural and domestic workers were cut out. Given that more than 60% of the black labor force in the 30s could be found in these jobs, including nearly 85% of black women, about 2/3 of all black people were denied. And those extensions stood until the mid-1950s. The political scientist Suzanne Mettler has shown in her work, Divided Citizens, that women who make up more than 90% of domestic workers at the time were also cut out by the exclusion of casual or temporary workers. And these were the very workers who were making such low wages that saving for retirement was virtually impossible. Unemployment insurance served as a true safety net, catching someone without work for the first time, but the same agriculture and domestic employee exclusions also applied. This program went even further, requiring a history of steady work before someone was laid off in order to get benefits, an advantage most black workers didn't have. Women on the whole fared even worse. Policymakers operated on the assumption that the primary function of unemployment insurance was to replace the wages of male breadwinners who were understood to earn a family wage. Most women worked in intermittent or part-time jobs that didn't qualify. The Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which for the first time created a floor under wages and a roof over hours, ensuring that people weren't worked to death for a pittance, again excluded farm workers and maids. Domestic workers weren't added until 1974. And only last year did home health aides get the same treatment. Unionization created another economic foothold, but that too was mostly available to white men. The National Labor Relations Act enshrined a number of labor rights that significantly increased the movement, While just 4 million Americans were union members in 1929, by 1948 it reached 14.2 million. But women made up less than 1/10 of union members through 1940. So, Jim, this editorial goes on to say that they believe that Trump wants to make America great again for white men, which are his supporters. And, 50 years ago, it probably wasn't so great for minorities and women. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and in the Omaha World Herald, letters to the editor of the Public Pulse, there are a number of, brief, but there are a number of letters addressing politics. So we'll get into some of those. First one, though, is not so much related to politics, though it kind of brings it in. Let's see here. First one is entitled "A Long-Term Answer Needed on Garbage." Once again, I watched as the guys picked up my trash and yard waste and tossed it into the back of a truck. I had hoped the city would have come to an environmentally sound decision regarding pickup of yard waste by now. But it seems the decision is to combine these pickups in the hope that there will be a methane solution at the landfill. Really? What's the timeline? All that yard waste is set to take up large amounts of space at the landfill, and we have no adequate methane gathering technology in place, and the yard waste no longer goes to good use. As for the story that waste management couldn't find enough employees to do separate pickups, what did the company do before? Does it need to offer a higher wage? This combined pickup isn't good for our city, and I am very disappointed in the mayor and the city government that they couldn't find a better temporary solution. That letter written by Susan Bigley of Omaha. The second letter is entitled "Commutes Shouldn't Take This Long." It took me 38 minutes to drive just 8.3 miles recently. It's a joke. With the shut down lanes and closed streets, folks need to leave their homes a lot earlier just to get where they need to be on time. Omaha is not so big that this situation should be tolerated. The mayor needs to stop fighting with everyone on everything and focus on making something work. Let's get the traffic moving. That letter written by Denise Bradshaw of Omaha. Now we get into some specific politics as these letters go on. This next one's entitled "Political Parties Are Gaming the Process." Unelected superdelegates to the Democratic National Convention, more than 700 of them, will likely decide who the presidential nominee will be. The Republican establishment, until recently, was scheming to use rules to eliminate Donald Trump as the nominee, even though he was millions of votes ahead of his nearest rival. Thankfully, as in Oz, the curtain has been pulled aside, exposing the wizards who have granted themselves powers that make a mockery of the principle of one person, one vote. What is really the purpose of primary voting when it produces results distorted beyond recognition by the party's establishments? Undoubtedly, these distortions only add to the voter discontent festering in our nation and could produce nominees we truly do not desire nor wish to follow and who will not do the will of the people. That letter written by Paul Spatz of Osmond, Nebraska. Next one is turning their backs on their comrades. Politics make strange bedfellows. Don Bacon, a 30-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and former Nebraska Governor Dave Heineman, a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, stand by Donald Trump, who repeatedly refused to serve the country that has made his family wealthy. In my opinion, Bacon and Heinemann turned their backs on the 58,000 plus patriots who paid the ultimate sacrifice in Vietnam, including the nearly 400 Nebraskans. Party loyalty above respect to their absent companions. They must be so proud. That letter written by Cesar Rosales, Jr. of Omaha. Trump should change the GOP. Republicans are trying to change Donald Trump into a true representative of the GOP. They didn't think he would get this far, let alone win, and they have found themselves unable to do anything about it. Trump won because his supporters are sick and tired of the status quo. So rather than address the concerns of his supporters and make some changes, the party is going to instead try to change Trump. That letter written by Cecil Case of Omaha. Great news for the Democrats. As a frequent Democratic voter, I wanted to take a moment to sincerely thank Republicans for your presumptive nominee, Donald Trump. Without a doubt, he's the best thing to happen to the Democratic Party in a long, long time. He will help us win the White House again. In fact, I'm not sure we could do it without him. That letter written by Ron Taylor of Omaha. Term limits would cut down corruption. We need term limits across the board in all elected positions. Our founders never desired career politicians, and for good reasons. Some argue the best term limit is to vote them out. That is but a cynical, unrealistic, and nonsensical statement. Why? After politicians have gained some tenure, too many of them forget that they are there to represent the taxpayer. They too often learn which wheels to grease to ensure their continuance in office. Absolute power does corrupt, absolutely. Folks, support efforts for term limits. That letter written by William Steiner of Omaha. And the last letter, Steve, in the public pulse is entitled, Why Vote for Chambers? The only thing more pathetic than Omaha State Senator Ernie Chambers and his racist rhetoric is the fact that people continue to vote for him. I can't wait for the time when he's just a footnote in our political history, because he was an embarrassment to his district and our state. That letter written by Herman Volman of Omaha. And that does conclude the letters in the public pulse.
All right. The infamous Omaha World Herald public pulse. Well, this editorial on the opinion page of the New York Times caught my attention. It's written by Neil Gross, a professor of sociology at Colby College. He's the author of Why Are Professors Liberal and Why Do Conservatives Care? And it says, the headline is, Why Are the Highly Educated So Liberal? In 1979, a short book called The Future of Intellectuals and the Rise of the New Class, sociologist Alvin Goldner took up a question then vigorously debated by social analysts. Did the student movements of the 1960s signal that the highly educated were on their way to becoming a major political force in American society? His answer was yes. As a man of the left, he had mixed feelings about this development, since he already thought the intelligentsia might be tempted to put its own interest ahead of the marginalized groups for whom it often claimed to speak. Today, with an ideological gap widening along educational lines in the U.S., Dr. Goldner's arguments are worth revisiting. Now that so many people go to college, Americans with bachelor's degrees no longer constitute an educational elite. But the most highly educated Americans, those who have attended graduate or professional schools, are starting to come together as a political bloc. Last month, the Pew Research Center released a study showing that nearly a third of those who went to graduate or professional schools have down the line liberal views on social, economic, and environmental matters, whereas this is true for just 1 in 10 Americans generally. An additional quarter of postgrads have mostly liberal views. These numbers reflect drastic change. While professionals have been in the Democratic column for a while, in 1994, only 7% of postgrads held consistently liberal political opinions. Dr. Gould's new class wasn't exactly the contemporary intelligentsia with its Washington political analysts, New York editors, and Bay Area biotech researchers, but it was close. Dr. Gouldner observed changes in the American occupational structure that he thought were altering the balance of power among social classes. As he saw it, beginning in the early 20th century, increasing complexity in science, technology, economic affairs, and government meant that the old money class no longer had the expertise to directly manage the work process or the ship of state. Members of the old class turned to scientists, engineers, managers, human relations specialists, economists, and other professionals for help. As these experts multiplied, they realized the extent of their collective power. They demanded fitting levels of pay and status and insisted on professional autonomy. A new class was born, neither owner nor worker. A distinguishing feature of this new class, according to Dr. Gouldner, was the way it spoke and argued. Steeped in science and expert knowledge, it embraced a culture of critical discourse. Evidence and logic were valued. Appeals to traditional sources of authority were not. Members of the new class raised their children in such a culture, and it was these children, allergic to authoritarian values, who as young adults were at the center of the student revolts, finding common ground with dissatisfied humanistic intellectuals bent on changing the world. Dr. Gouldner assumed that as the student radicals aged and entered the workforce, they would retain their leftist sympathies, but he conceded that they might also work to shore up their privileges. He characterized the new class as the great hope of the left in a period when the American labor movement was in decline, yet also as flawed. The Pew study doesn't necessarily vindicate Dr. Gouldner's entire theory, but it does indicate that most highly educated professionals are coming to form, if not a new class, at least a reliably liberal political grouping. While there's ample evidence of the professional class using its economic and educational capital to preserve its advantage, think of the clustering of professionals into exclusive neighborhoods, or the early immersion of professional class children into a world of literacy, art, and science. It's more left as evidence even on questions of economic redistribution. The author's own analysis of data from the General Social Survey shows that in recent decades, as class inequality has increased, Americans who hold advanced degrees have grown more supportive of government's efforts to reduce income differences, whether through changes to taxes or strengthening the welfare system. On this issue, the views of the highly educated are now similar to those of groups with much lower levels of education who have a real material stake in reducing inequalities. Even higher income advanced degree holders have become more redistributionalists, if less so than others. What explains the consolidation of the highly educated into a liberal bloc? The growing number of women with advanced degrees is part of it, as well as well-educated women tend to be especially left-leaning. Equally important is the Republican Party's move to the right since the 80s, at odds with the social liberalism that long characterized the well-educated, along with the perception that conservatives are anti-intellectual, hostile to science, and at war with the economy. The phenomenon is mostly a boon for the Democrats. While only 10% of American adults hold advanced degrees, the number is expected to rise. The group is active politically and influentially. But Dr. Goldner's new class theory should alert Democrats to a lurking danger. It is probably right that something like a culture of critical discourse can be found in the workplaces and households and in publications read by Americans who have attended graduate or professional school. The challenge for the Democrats moving forward will be to develop appeal to voters that resonate not just with this important constituency, but also with other crucial groups in the Democratic coalition. Some of the draw of Donald Trump for white working class male voters is that he does not speak in a culture of critical discourse. Indeed, he mocks that culture, tapping into class resentments. The Democrats may find they need to give up a little of their wonkiness if they want resounding victories. It's not in their long-term interest to be too much what Pat Buchanan often referred to as the party of the PhDs.
All right. Stephen, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to today's living and entertainment. Got an interesting article here in the Omaha World Herald entitled Regrowth of Native Culture. An unfamiliar song permeates this block of Dundee. From a fenced-in backyard, a few feathers poke up into the sky. The song grows louder and punchier until the chanting soloist, Taylor Keene, stops shaking the beads and breathes the last words. He thanks the dozen or so people gathered in his newly irrigated backyard and gestures to his mother, Okta, who says a prayer in the language of the Omaha native tribe. The sod in the yard is ripped up and bermed, mounds of soil blessed with cross patterns of water. Soon, sunflowers, beans, squash, and corn will shoot up, a throwback to the people who occupied this ground more than a century ago, before Keene's ancestors left Omaha for the reservation. Keene, a member of the Omaha tribe and Cherokee Nation, is trying to save what's left of his native people's corn by growing it and sharing the seeds. His project, dubbed Sacred Seed, aims to take these heirloom kernels and plant them again in Nebraska, so that they might strengthen a fading part of native culture and perhaps someday provide financial relief for his people. These seeds are very, very rare, so the fact that any of them remain is amazing. Not unlike the bison of the plains, said Keene, a Creighton University lecturer. The idea started with an ultimatum: plant it or lose it. Keene's mentor, a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder named D. Ward Walker, issued the warning a decade ago. If the few remaining Old World species of Native American seeds somehow cross-pollinated with any corporately owned breeds of corn, these corporations could patent the offspring, and another piece of your culture could cease to exist. There's a race against time to save a lot of these seeds, Keen said. So he traveled around the Midwest in search of untainted seeds from the 1800s and the guidance to grow them just as his forefathers did. That led him here to his backyard, where at the new moon on May 6th, Keen and more than a dozen others, mostly from the project's partners at Omaha Permaculture, planted their crop for the second year, doing it the old world way. They repeated the process at about a dozen plots in backyards, vacant lots, and other places in town. This year will bring sacred seed close to the full-scale operation Keen wants. Once that happens, Keen said he plans to distribute seeds to native groups and others who plan to plant them the traditional way. He will also sell the seeds, create ready-to-plant kits, and possibly breed their own hybrids. What Keen learns along the way will help inform the book he's writing, Rediscovering America, Sacred Geography, the Ancient Earthenworks, and the Real Story of America. One of the biggest focal points for the Sacred Seed Project is technique. When the group plants, it follows traditional protocol outlined in a book Keen found at a fur trading museum near Shadder, Nebraska, called Among the Indians of the Upper Missouri. According to the old ways, the ground should be minimally tilled. Childbearing age should plant the seeds at the first new moon of the new year. In Native American culture, Keen said, the new year is marked by first thunder, which came in late April this year. Last year, it wasn't until around Memorial Day. Each plot includes the traditional three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, which share the soil well, and in the case of squash, can defend against predatory raccoons. In Nebraska, they add a fourth sister, sunflowers, to break the winds of the Great Plains. In order to keep the corn from cross-pollinating, they hand-pollinate crops, placing corn condoms, brown paper bags over the tops of the tassels. Before the group planted in Keen's backyard, he sang, dressed in full regalia, and his mother prayed. The planters obey the rule. If you're going to plant it, you have to sing to it. I never thought I'd be a farmer. I never thought I'd be doing any of this stuff, Keen said, but I can tell you something. Once the corn started growing, it changed me in a profound way. I would sit out there every evening, especially once the plants were mature, and just listen to the wind blowing in the corn stalks and marveling at the miracle of Mother Nature. In the fall, students in his Creighton practicum class, The Economics of Sacred Seeds, helped him harvest the first crops, which grew from corn and gourd seeds from the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. As he pulled back the husks of each ear, Keen found different colored kernels, to his surprise. They were red, blue, purple, orange, white, black, all kinds of varieties. Now there are 15 different types and growing. Corn has been here for 10,000 years. It knows how to adapt, Keen said. It's experimenting. These different colors are just different pigments. Someday, Keen envisions Omaha tribal members growing these crops and selling them on reservation land that they currently rent out to farmers. He has talked with the tribe and promised to give it some seeds from this year's crop if tribe members are interested. He has also spoken with chefs in town, hoping sacred seed produce might make it onto local menus. Clayton Chapman of the Gray Plume and Paul Kolik of Leboland both showed interest in cooking with the produce once the program grows to scale. As a test drive, they're planning a fundraising Thanksgiving feast using some of this year's crop. I think there's so much heritage to it. There's so much rich culture, Chapman said. These ingredients are what are native to this part of the country that we've lost touch with. Keen's kind of bringing the St. John corn back from the dead. In late April, nearly a year since he first planted the corn, King gathered about 15 sacred seed pioneers at his home on a Sunday, where hominy and bison soup stewed in a slow cooker. They talked about the first year and what they'll do different. And they dipped ladles for their first taste of the ancestral corn, among the first to grow in Omaha since the 1800s. Keene was nervous. Had he messed up? Was the seed bad? Could the old world ways really make that big of a difference? When I took the first bite, I was like, whoa, he said. It's like the difference between white rice and wild rice.
That's pretty cool. It'd be kind of fun to have some ancient seed corn.
Yeah,
See
really
what it
very,
tastes like.
very interesting story.
Yeah, very interesting.
Wish him well.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff has a tendency to do well too, as an economic proposition. It really does.
Right.
Branding and bars, and it's from the New York Times. Branding and bars have long gone hand in hand, but the days when cocktail napkins, swizzle sticks, cardboard coasters, and matchbooks were the last word in tactile advertising are over. In today's distracted culture, cocktail bars need something a little flashier to chisel their names into the drinker's consciousness, and here's a few of the most creative. Preserved in ice, that's the headline. Gaze down at a huge ice cube floating in your old-fashioned at Dante, the Italian-style bar in Greenwich Village, and you'll have no doubt what you're drinking. And I'm looking at an ice cube there. It's a huge ice cube. It's the size of the glass, and it says Dante on it. That's pretty amazing. Cut into the side of the frozen block is the bar's poetic name. The owners have a copper ice stamp, custom made in Hong Kong. And they had that made in Hong Kong shortly after one of them worked at a guest bartender at Zuma, a bar in Dubai that uses a similar ice brand. I was amazed by how many guests were taking pictures of it, said Naren Young, who is one of the partners in Dante in Greenwich Village. In an age of Instagram, it's hard to ignore free publicity. Boy, yeah, that's true. Ice brands can also be found at Hemingway Bar and Cash Only Bar in Prague. Tart Blast citrus twists. Oh, okay, this is the headline. A Tart Blast. Citrus twists make a handy canvas. Cannon, a cocktail bar in Seattle, recently began burning a tiny brand of a cannon onto its swaths of lemon and orange. We are always looking to give our guests a moment of wow, said Jamie Boderu, an owner, or a sensory experience that gives them a moment of pause, something that for a brief second takes them out of their day. The Office, a bar below the Avery in Chicago, stamps its name on twists, and the bar at the Manhattan restaurant Vaucluse etches a V on some of its citrus. I'm an old advertising specialty guy, so I'm really geeking out on this here, The garnish pick, okay, headline, the garnish pick. When it came time to order specialty barware at Whitechapel, a gin-focused bar in San Francisco, Martin Cate, who owns it, and the tiki bar Smuggler's Cove knew something original was called for. Normally, I do a swizzle stick, he said. That's a tiki bar tradition, and I've done them at every bar I've been involved with since day one. But at Whitechapel, something to spear olives with was of more value, so I did a garnish pick. Coins of the realm. Bar tokens, special coins that can be exchanged for drinks, are as old as the hills, so old that most people have forgotten about them. Bar Leather Apron in Honolulu is bringing them back. We created a complimentary cocktail coin as a way to promote our bar at events, or just as a giveaway for people who visit, said Justin Park, an owner. Many customers like them so much, they don't trade them for cocktails. I've heard people using them as golf ball markers, paperweights, or something cool they just like to keep. Posting on a name. Branding ice cubes and twists is one thing. Avery in Chicago is taking burning a bar name into a drinker's brain to a new level. Soon, when you order a rum drink called Brand New to the Game, the pre-drink entertainment will include watching a pine coaster being branded tableside with Avery. How about that? The fire created by the brand will then be used to smoke the inside of the glass before it's filled. And yes, you can take the coaster home with you. Of course you can. That was great. That made my day. I am such a geek. I am such an advertising specialty geek. So.
Nothing wrong with that, Steve.
Nothing wrong. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell my wife that.
Well, today is May 16th, and here's some famous things that happened on this day in history, according to the Omaha World Herald. In 1868, the U.S. Senate failed by one vote to convict President Andrew Johnson as it took its first ballot on the 11 articles of impeachment against him. In 1939, the federal government began its first food stamp program in Rochester, New York. In 1960, the first working laser was demonstrated at Hughes Research Laboratories in Malibu, California. On this date in history, in 1966, China launched the Cultural Revolution, a radical youth-driven reform movement aimed at bolstering Chairman Mao Zedong while purging the country of counter-revolutionaries. It's been estimated that during the decade of upheaval that followed, hundreds of thousands, perhaps more, died as a direct or indirect result of the Cultural Revolution. 1975, Japanese climber Junko Tabel became the first woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest. And on this date in history, in 1991, Queen Elizabeth II became the first British monarch to address the U.S. Congress as she lauded U.S.-British cooperation in the Persian Gulf War. And Stephen, there's quite a list of celebrities who are celebrating birthdays today. Actor Pierce Brosnahan, 63 today.
63, okay. I would have guessed.
Actress Deborah Winger.
It's about the same age.
Pretty close, 61.
Yeah, okay.
Do you remember Olympic gold medal gymnast Olga Korbut?
Yeah.
61.
Yeah.
And let's see, what test your music background? Dave Matthews Band.
Oh yeah, okay.
One of their members, a guy named Boyd Tinsley.
Household name.
Yeah. Any idea how old he might be, do you think?
50?
Yeah, pretty close, 52.
Okay.
And then Janet Jackson. She is 50. So
She is. Okay.
and a whole list of others. I don't recognize a lot of their names.
If they're a lot younger than me, I don't know who they are.
That's the thing with me. So that's what we got for today's birthdays.
Okay. Well, I got some business news here from the New York Times from Wall Street. Wall Street rises, buoyed again by oil prices. And if you've gone to the gas station lately, you've seen gas prices going up.
Yes, I saw this morning, even from yesterday, they were $1.99, now they're $2.12 today in the Omaha area. So.
Exactly. A jump in oil prices and some deal news helped send stocks up broadly on Monday, breaking a 3-day losing streak. Investors bought from the start of trading, pushing oil drillers and other energy stocks up sharply. And from what I've read, we love the low oil prices at the pump, but it's not exactly great for Wall Street. A bullish oil report from Goldman Sachs helped send benchmark U.S. crude up 3.3% to its highest close in 6 months. All 10 sectors of the Standard & Poor's 500 stock index rose. Major indexes were also boosted by news that Warren Buffett had invested in Apple. Probably a pretty good time to buy because Apple's at a 3-year low. The S&P 500 rose 20.05 points or 1% to 2,066.66. Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 175.39 points or 1% to 17,710.71. NASDAQ gained 57.78 points or 1.2% to 4,775.46. The report from Goldman argued that the glut in oil prices had turned into a deficit, and so prices could continue to rise. The sunny forecast plus oil production troubles in Nigeria pushed U.S. crude up $1.51 to $47.72 a barrel. When oil prices climb, investors think the earning drought is at an end, said Tim Courtney, Chief Investment Officer at Essential Wealth Advisors. Whatever happens to energy drives all the markets. Energy shares in the S&P 500 rose 1.6% on Monday. Marathon Oil jumped 4%. Devon Energy also rose 4%. In deal news, Tribune Publishing soared $2.61 or 23% to $14.08 a share after Gannett raised its offer to buy the publisher. The new offer comes 1 week after Tribune, which owns the LA Times and the Chicago Trib and other newspapers, accepted a poison pill plan to help it remain independent. Gannett rose 2.2%. Memorial Resource Development rose 41 cents or 3% to $13.86 per share after rival natural gas producer Range Resources said it would buy them. Anacor Pharmaceuticals rocketed 57%. Pfizer, after Pfizer announced a deal to buy them, and Pfizer went up. We mentioned that Warren Buffett bought 9.8 million shares of Apple. He's also in the running to buy Yahoo, or what's left of Yahoo. The move was of interest given Buffett's longstanding aversion to tech stocks. He has said it was too hard to determine what tech companies will be worth in the future because their business evolves so quickly. I was waiting for somebody to come out and say that because he was like totally anti-internet for years. In other energy markets, Brent crude used to price international oils rose $1.14 a share or 2.4%. $1.14 a barrel or 2.4% to $48.97 a barrel in London. In other energy trading in New York, wholesale gasoline rose 2 cents to $1.61 a gallon. Precious and industrial metal prices closed higher. Gold gained $1.50 to $1,274.20 an ounce. Silver rose 2 cents to $17.15 an ounce. Copper added 2 cents to $2.09 a pound. U.S. government bond prices fell. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note rose to 1.76% from 1.70%. The dollar rose to 108.98 yen from 108.63 yen. Euro rose to dollar 13, 1.1320 from 1.1307. Okay, now we're going to do a quiz on what I just read.
Oh boy, there you go. Yes, we'll have Emily take that.
Well,
quiz.
Emily, she'll be taking calls. Caller number 8.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little sports, Stephen?
Anything football in there?
Oh, of course.
You know, we landed
This
a guy.
is the Omaha World Herald.
We're like number 11 in Scout. I don't know what it really means that's early, but
I know,
we're number 11 in
I
Scout.
don't think it really does mean much. But yeah, you're right. They did. And there is an article in today's Omaha World Herald of the newest commitment to their 2017 recruiting class, an offensive tackle by the name of Matt Sichterman. He's from Kings Mill, Ohio High School. This young man, will be a senior this coming fall. Highly recruited, but he has now committed to Nebraska. And kind of an interesting thing, he's a triplet.
Oh,
He has
a triplet.
a brother and a sister.
I'll be darned.
His sister just committed to swim collegiately at University of Tennessee. His brother also plays football, and he's apparently not getting the attention that Matt is getting, but he's on the radar, and Nebraska is also looking at him. So we'll see. But this means he is now the 9th commitment for the 2017
That's
recruiting class. So,
That's right.
So again, like you just said, that things are pretty exciting right now when you talk about that, and Nebraska is getting a lot of attention.
And didn't Tim Miles get a big guy today too?
Tim Miles did. Now that news came later in the day, so it's not in the Omaha World Herald, but the news broke, I think, this afternoon or late morning that this big center he was after has committed to Nebraska. So that's pretty exciting for Nebraska basketball too, because they certainly needed that.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball continues. We're getting just a month away from College World Series, and a lot is going to have to happen between now and then. University of Nebraska baseball team played over the weekend and did well. And so, unfortunately, Creighton was on the road playing Xavier University, and they lost 2 out of 3 to Xavier, including 2 games in a row, Saturday and Sunday, where they lost in the bottom of the 9th inning. Yesterday was giving up a 2-run homer in the bottom of the 9th, and they lost 6-4. Something similar to that happened on Saturday, so kind of left a bitter taste in their mouth. But hopefully they'll get back on track and can still maybe do well in the Big East tournament and still get a bid to play in the regionals, as the University of Nebraska is hoping to do as well. And Nebraska women's softball team is also still playing and doing well. And on the front page of the sports section today of the Omaha World Herald, there's a nice picture and a story about the men's outdoor track and field team prevailing and finishing first in the Big Ten tournament. And so they had a very comfortable scoring margin over the closest team, which was Michigan. And so congratulations to them.
Yeah.
So a lot of things going on, including and right now even high school soccer, the finals are going underway. The girls' Class A and B games are being played as we speak. Omaha Scud against Gretna was playing at 5 o'clock today. That game might be over. Millard North in Omaha, Marion just should be underway. And then tomorrow night is the boys, the Elkhorn South and Columbus SCOTUS Class B championship game, followed by Omaha South versus Omaha Creighton Prep. So,
oh, great.
And high school baseball going on too in Lincoln and out at Werner Park. So,
well, and what's going on recruiting wise from football is pretty exciting in that Nebraska seems to have some competitive advantages. First there was the landing Keyshawn Johnson Jr.,
right,
which is a relationship thing going back to when Mike Riley was the offensive coordinator at USC. And
yes, with his dad.
Keyshawn, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you got that, and that got people's attention. And then if I understood it correctly, we're offering all the student athletes, laptops and some sort of stipend that meets NCAA rules and regs,
Right.
but nobody else had thought of it before.
Right.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
And
Got a lot of innovative things.
A lot of
going
innovative
on.
things going on.
Yeah.
And so, it'd be interesting. I think we'll have a better year this upcoming year. I think we just last year we could have just as easily been 9-4 as 6-7.
Oh, absolutely.
Just with a few breaks here and there.
Starting with the first game.
Yeah, starting with the first game. the Illinois game, I think the last time I felt that poorly was after the 82 Orange Bowl.
No. Yeah.
The Illinois game was.
Yes.
Why do I follow football?
Yeah.
I remember thinking, this is a stupid sport. I'm going to quit watching football.
Exactly.
Anyhow. This is a story from New York Times with the headline, for foreign investors in a soccer stadium, U.S. visas are the goal. And the date line is Orlando. For years, sports teams have tried to defray the multi-million-dollar costs of new stadiums by asking fans to pay thousands for personal seat licenses that entitle them to buy season tickets. Flavio Augusto da Silva is taking the concept further in what may be the first deal of its kind. Da Silva, the majority owner of Orlando City of Major League Soccer, is asking investors from Brazil, China, and elsewhere to pay $500,000 each for a stake in the stadium he's building near downtown Orlando. Okay. In return, the foreign investors receive annual dividends, 2 season tickets, and something even more valuable, a green card that allows them, their spouses, and sometimes even their children to live and work in the U.S. And it's perfectly legal. It uses a 25-year-old federal program known as EB-5 that is getting some renewed scrutiny in Congress. But created in 1990, the program was intended to help pay for infrastructure projects in rural areas and poor urban neighborhoods. After bank lending dried up with the last recession, developers turned to the program to finance hotels, condominiums, and other projects from Manhattan to Miami. And as a result, the number of EB-5 visas awarded grew to almost 9,000 last year from fewer than 100 in 2003. Mr. Da Silva, though, is building a $156 million stadium, not a high-rise building or a shopping mall. And he is marketing to foreigners, not because lending is tight, but because lawmakers in Florida would not provide subsidies for the stadium in the Paramore neighborhood of Orlando. For us, it's a business decision, said Mr. Da Silva, who expects to raise about half the construction costs through the Cash for Visa program. There was already demand from people who wanted to move to the U.S., have a green card, and have a good opportunity to participate in the growth of the club. Orlando City use of a visa program, which was criticized by a leading Republican in March as riddled with corruption and national security vulnerabilities, is a new approach for sports teams looking for ways to pay for stadiums without financial support from local communities, where officials are under pressure from voters opposed to using public money to help wealthy owners. EB5 financing helped pay for infrastructure work to Barclays Center in Brooklyn, but not for the arena itself. Developers previously tried to use the EB5 program to finance stadium-only projects in California, Florida, and elsewhere, but they hit roadblocks, including the unpredictable pace of getting EB5 investors approved for projects that often have to be opened on specific timelines. The Orlando project features a 25,000-seat stadium scheduled to open for the 2017 seasons of both Orlando City SE and SC and the Orlando Pride, the women's team that Mr. DeSilva owns with his partner Phil Rollins. Originally, the city and county agreed to subsidize the project, but when state lawmakers balked at approving a sales tax rebate, DeSilva turned to the EB5 program, something Orlando's mayor, Buddy Dyer, cheered. So that's kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah. So you invest in this thing, and amongst other things, you get a green card and dividends.
Gosh, what a deal.
Yeah.
Huh.
Such a deal. What could be better?
Just to go back to high school sports, I just checked online, and the Omaha Skutt versus Gretna Class B high school girls soccer game has concluded, and Omaha Skutt did win that game 3-1.
Huh?
And the Millard North is currently playing Omaha Marion. Talk a little bit about Major League Baseball. Yesterday, I don't know if you had heard this, Steve, or if any of our... Yeah, boy.
Boy, who hasn't?
Man, that's been something. They have a picture here in the World Herald about showing this guy from Texas just punching.
That I saw that on social media. It's all over social media today.
Jose Bautista.
I'm surprised he didn't get his jaw broken or something.
Well, exactly. Yeah. It's like, man. So that must have been quite the fight. The article in the paper says it needed 10 minutes to restore order as players for both teams rushed the field, and there were 8 ejections between players and coaches that were ejected. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of punishment comes down.
Yeah.
I would assume more than one will probably get suspended for a game or two, and there will certainly be some fines. But they say that this has been there's been some bad blood between these two teams for dating back to last season. So this may not be the end of it.
The guy that threw the punch, I think, said he was disrespected or something like that. So anyway, that's what happened there. But in the American League, Baltimore and the Boston Red Sox are currently tied for first place in American League East. And in the Central Division, the Chicago White Sox maintain a 5-game lead over Cleveland. And then in the West Division, Texas has a half-game lead over Seattle. The reigning World Series champs, the Kansas City Royals, continuing to struggle. They did win yesterday, beating up on the hapless Atlanta Braves. Shouldn't say beating up. I mean, they took them 13 innings to beat them 4-2. And they're 5.5 games back from Chicago. And in the National League, you've got Washington Nationals with a 1-game lead over Philadelphia. In the Central Division, the amazing Chicago Cubs continue their hot play. They've got the best record in baseball. They're 27 wins, 9 losses. And the Ricketts family's done a good job.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
They've got an 8-game lead over Pittsburgh and St. Louis. And in the West, you've got San Francisco Giants with a 1-game lead over the Los Angeles Dodgers. So obviously a lot of baseball to be played, but some of these teams are getting out. But who would have guessed the Cubs would be playing that well?
You know, I think they'll probably play well after the All-Star break. I'm so used to them, you know, being fairly competitive up to the All-Star break and then nosediving. So I don't think that's going to happen this year.
I don't either. They just got such a strong
Too
team.
much talent.
Too much talent, both pitching and hitting.
Or so much talent. I don't think you can ever have too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much talent.
So much.
Now, how are the Yankees doing?
Oh, you know, they actually are doing better. They came to Kansas City and won a couple games. Or excuse me, Kansas City was there. But anyway, they've got they still have a losing record, 16 wins, 20 losses. But in their last 10,
they're doing a lot better than that.
yeah, in their last 10 games, they won 7 and lost 3.
Yeah.
So they are playing better. So we'll see.
I love to root against them. So,
yeah. One of the things that they won yesterday over Chicago White Sox 7-5, but Carlos Beltran for the Yankees, he's been around for over 15 years.
Yeah.
He started with Kansas City.
Yeah.
And anyway, he hit his 400th career home run yesterday, and he's only hitting 246, but he's just really getting some clutch hits. Yesterday was his 8th homer of the year, and drove in 3 runs. And so he's just,
Wow.
you know, for a guy that's been around as long as he has, he's
That's
doing
pretty good.
well.
Well, Jim Carlson, Steve Sleeper here. Jim, we're at 8 o'clock.
It is that time. Good night, everyone. Have a great week.
All right.
All right.
That brings us to the end of your live readings or another
So, does this mean you'll be back Wednesday evening?
Wednesday evening, yeah.
You haven't got